Fantasy football just got turned upside down. There's a ton to talk about. Devonte Adams going to the Jets. You've got Amari Cooper going to the Bills. Wow. Let's talk about each of the players that was impacted today, where their new fantasy ranking is going to be, and whether this is stock up or stock down for them, because there are a ton of fantasy implications for your fantasy football team. And I'll start with Devonte Adams here. Devonte Adams, no question about it, stock up. Devonte Adams goes from one of the worst situations in the NFL with the Raiders, where their starting quarterback is Aiden O'Connell, who shouldn't be a starting quarterback in the NFL, but he is, or Gardner Minshew, the other option. A place where he was clearly unhappy, a place where he was getting his lowest target share in 7 years, a place where the team as a whole was a little bit dysfunctional, and now you go to another dysfunctional team who just fired their head coach, but he goes back with Aaron Rodgers. And obviously, this is the big thing for why Devonte Adams is going to be stock up here. Better quarterback play, a connection to Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, the chemistry there, we know from more than anything, Aaron Rodgers likes throwing to his best friends. And Devonte Adams is the best friend that he has in terms of most talented. He's the more talented best friend. He's the best friend that when you put him on the same team, it's not fair. And Devonte Adams goes back to the quarterback that was able to get him the most red zone targets in the NFL when they were on the same team in Green Bay. And so now Devonte Adams, rest of season. Before this trade, I had Devonte Adams ranked around 19, maybe 18, maybe 20. Now, Devonte Adams rest of the season, in my opinion, is a low-end wide receiver 1. I have him ranked right between Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think that when you're talking about what to expect from Devonte Adams for the rest of the season, he is going to get the majority of the targets there, and he also is going to be the primary red zone threat for that offense. That offense as a whole has potential to get better just because of Devonte Adams. And again, if not top 12, even top 8. Devonte Adams going back with Aaron Rodgers, these two have instant chemistry. This is obviously, if you have Devonte Adams on your fantasy football team, this is a big deal for you. Aaron Rodgers is a quarterback upgrade. It's a situational upgrade, even if it's not a great situation. Even going to New York, it's still an upgrade. And it looks like somebody who gained a ton of value today. So on the flip side of that.
You've got Garrett Wilson that you got to talk about. Yeah, this is a tough conversation to have. Because it doesn't matter which way you cut it, in our opinion, there is no way where this is a net positive outcome for Garrett Wilson from a fantasy football perspective when you're talking about the NFL and his development as a wide receiver long term and him being able to probably take advantage of his skill sets in the slot that he hasn't been able to really utilize like he did back in college. I think there's plenty of positive outcomes for Garrett Wilson long term. This year, with his production in fantasy football, it is neutral at the absolute best case scenario, best, right, for him. And when you're looking at the way that he's likely going to be utilized, again, this is assuming that the Jets as an organization are going to be competent and, do probably what's the right thing for Garrett Wilson in this situation, and that is translate him to a majority slot wide receiver where he does a lot of work between the 20s with Aaron Rodgers, and then once you get into the red zone, Devonte Adams gets a ton of work. And this really is going to be based on, historically speaking, with Devonte Adams, he is the red zone guy. This is where he's made his millions and millions of dollars in the NFL. This is where he and Aaron Rodgers have, brought together a Hall of Fame level pairing between a wide receiver and a quarterback. It's been in the red zone. Devonte Adams is a low-end wide receiver 1 because of his touchdown upside. And everyone says, oh, well, touchdowns are volatile. They're not with Devonte Adams. You can go look at the history, go look at what he's done every single year, even without Aaron Rodgers. It's there. Like this is what he does. So you're looking at that, you're like, well, shoot, that kind of takes away Garrett Wilson's consistent touchdown upside. Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. Now, with Garrett Wilson's floor, I think it actually is still not that bad. I think he has a pretty safe, pretty high floor because Devonte Adams is going to eat up a ton of the defensive attention on the other side of the ball, and that's probably going to open up the field a little bit for Garrett Wilson to do a lot between the 20s. So when you're looking at what he did in college, it's actually very interesting. He was, when you're looking at the percentage of his snaps, I think his sophomore season at Ohio State, he had like 73% of his snaps directly from the slot. And that's really promising to see that he's been able to show that before. I think he's going to be able to do that at the NFL level with Aaron Rodgers. And when you take into account the fact that the Jets offensive line is one of the worst in the league, it looks like at the moment, Rodgers doesn't have a ton of time to throw the ball. So if he has to dump it off, it's either going to be to A, Bree Hall, who hasn't been getting a ridiculous amount of target volume, or B, it's going to be Garrett Wilson, who already has pre-established target volume and chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. I would probably bet on that. I would bet on Garrett Wilson probably getting like 8-ish, 7, 8, 9 targets per game pretty consistently, and make a nice living and be a really, really good starting option for you every single week. Upside wise, he's not going to amount to where you drafted him before the season started, being Aaron Rodgers' number 1 wide receiver. That's just not going to be the case, because it doesn't matter which way you cut it. Again, even if Garrett Wilson gets 140, 150 targets, which is best case scenario for him this season as a slot wide receiver, what's he going to finish at? What's his ceiling?
I mean, the reason that this is bad for Garrett Wilson is because you're cutting off his touchdown upside,
exactly.
Right? And so we've seen Garrett Wilson get 170 targets in a season and not score touchdowns, and he was only a high-end wide receiver 3. So with Garrett Wilson, I mean, I think you're talking about best case scenario. He ends up as a wide receiver 2 because he is going to be all the receptions, all the targets. But even his targets are going to be dwindled. This is a guy that's the wide receiver 7 through this week's games. And now you are going to see a drop off for Garrett Wilson because of Devonte Adams here. And so this is unfortunate. It caps his ceiling. And it's undeniable that Garrett Wilson can get as many targets as he wants. If he doesn't score touchdowns, his ceiling is completely diminished.
Yeah, and it sucks because he was the wide receiver 7 going into week 7. And he's been really coming on in the last couple of weeks, has looked really good, gotten plenty of target volume, 30% target share. You can kiss that target share goodbye because Devonte Adams will be taking that and probably exceeding that at this point. If the Allen Lazard experiment didn't teach you anything, I don't know what to tell you. Aaron Rodgers throws to his best friends. It doesn't matter how good they are. Now Devonte Adams is actually good, so he's gonna hog everything. He's gonna be amazing.
So we're recording this video, re-recording it because we already recorded a reaction video earlier for the Jets trade and the Amari trade went down. So this is real time. Nathan and I have not spoken about the Amari Cooper trade until right now on camera, so you're gonna get our live reaction. Amari, I'm gonna go ahead and update my rankings here. Before this trade, I had Amari Cooper at 29 for my rest of season wide receiver ranks.
All right. Well, I want to know what do you think his rest of the season is?
So I'm going to look. Would I take Amari Cooper over Jaden Reed? Yes. Would I take him over Garrett Wilson? Yes. Would I take him over Cooper Kupp and Stephon Diggs? Yes. Would I take him over DJ Moore? Yes. DK Metcalf? Yes. Chris Godwin? Yes. Devonte Adams? Yeah, I'll put him right there.
Low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2, baby. That is exactly where I'm at.
Which is insane. I mean, so you're talking about Amari Cooper. I saw some...
But it's not insane. That's the thing, is his target volume is already there, and it was with one of the worst quarterbacks in the league in Deshaun Watson. That target share is going to directly translate to Josh Allen and the Bills offense, and it's actually going to turn into production because Josh Allen can throw an accurate football.
Correct.
He's going to go nuts.
And I saw some people trying to make the case that Amari Cooper is actually washed because I saw one tweet about... I saw one tweet about like the worst like rated ESPN wide receiver. Oh my gosh, stop. Oh my gosh, that's desperate. Please. Oh my gosh, that's ignorant. Yeah. Amari Cooper has the worst quarterback situation in the NFL. Yep. How do I know this? Let's see if I can find a couple stats. So he's first in air yards this year. He's also first in unrealized air yards. The man has 500 unrealized air yards through 6 games. And you talk about that. Oh yeah, Amari Cooper is washed. He is second in the league in total route wins. Amari Cooper is fine. Amari Cooper on the Bills is better than fine, guys. This is a Bills wide receiver room where they drafted Keon Coleman, and based on how they used him in the first couple games or how much opportunity they gave him, they clearly expected Keon Coleman to come in and make a difference right away. And there's one little sound I have to that one. It didn't happen. And so this is a wide receiver room where you have Kahlil Shakir taking some of the targets, sure. Dalton Kincaid, we thought was going to take more of the targets. What I'm trying to say here is Amari Cooper will have as many targets as he wants in this offense, a Josh Allen offense, where Josh Allen is playing decent football right now. Not Josh Allen's best football. If Josh Allen and maybe this is part of it.
Not best Josh Allen fantasy football. I'll say that, because he's still looking pretty good. But
correct.
I'll tell you what, though, on the Josh Allen note, I think this raises his floor way higher than it was before Amari Cooper came into this offense, because a lot of his production was coming from his rushing upside and how many yards could he get on the ground, and then what were his wide receivers going to be able to do or not be able to do. At this point, the sky's the limit for Josh Allen. For me, in my rest of season rankings for quarterbacks, Josh Allen is back up to number 1. All he needed was a wide receiver like Stephon Diggs. And Amari Cooper is that. I think I'm
with you there. So, I mean, look, do I need to keep going? Amari Cooper, catchable target rate, 90th in the league. 48% of his targets were catchable. 48%. 8%. I cannot stress how bad of a situation Amari Cooper
awful.
had. It is so bad.
Holy crap.
He now goes to play with Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. All bets are off at this point. Mm-hmm. You are going to rank him at the worst as a high-end wide receiver 2 rest of the season, and he deserves it. He's going to a quarterback in Josh Allen to where Josh Allen can support a high-end wide receiver 1 in fantasy football, let alone a high-end wide receiver 2. And Josh Allen, you nailed it, hasn't really been that bad this season. Obviously, if from a fantasy perspective, you say it's been a little bit hit or miss, but some of Josh Allen's metrics actually grade out pretty good for this year. So it's clearly, no matter which way you look at it, it's clearly a quarterback upgrade. Amari Cooper, if you have him on your fantasy football team, congratulations. That's all I'm going to say about that. Congratulations. Mm-hmm. Yep. I absolutely
did not see this coming.
Oh my gosh.
This came out of nowhere. I think honestly, one of the few reasons they made this deal is probably because the Devonte Adams deal went down. Yeah, and probably. They were like, yeah, we should probably just get a wide receiver and just not let the Jets take the division.
That's probably true. So a couple of side notes from this one in terms of other impacts. Keon Coleman wasn't really doing anything before, but he's irrelevant now. And so if you have Keon Coleman, he's probably going to be droppable here in a week or two if he's not already droppable. So that's a big deal. And then you mentioned Josh Allen. Josh Allen's quarterback 1 rest of the season with Amari Cooper. So let's get into some of these other guys here that might have some impacts on some of the other teams.
Yeah, so these are like secondary impacts as a result, obviously, of the trades that went down. I do want to touch on the Raiders because they are quite interesting now, specifically a couple of guys. The first one being Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers at this point, rest of season is, I think he's your tight end 1. Or yes, 2. He's my tight end 2. I've Kittle at 1. They're in the same tier, honestly, at this point. Some people will try to knock Bowers and Jacoby Myers for this Devonte Adams move and say like, oh, well, now it just means that there's less threats on the field that defenses are going to have to worry about, and then they'll just be able to double Bowers or double Jacoby Myers, and then you obviously have Aiden O'Connell starting now, and it could be him or Minshew rest of the season. We don't really know. It's just discussing overall. Vegas is going to crash and burn. Yeah, Vegas is going to crash and burn as a team and an organization, but Brock Bowers is still going to produce, and I don't really care if Devonte Adams is or isn't on the field because the last 3 games Devonte Adams has not been playing and Brock Bowers has been productive. He's been totally fine. And yeah, you're going to have some boom bust games from Brock Bowers. You're going to have boom bust games from every single tight end in the league right now because none of them are as productive as guys like Brock Bowers and George Kittle. So with Bowers now being, in our opinion, the number 1 receiving option, you can treat him as a wide receiver there. He is the wide receiver 1. He's all over the field. He's going to get absolutely flooded with targets and easily finish as a top 2 tight ends this year. Barring injury, he's going to finish as a top 2 to 3 tight end. Look, to me, I'm just super personally pumped to see how Bowers is going to continue to perfect his craft at the NFL level and in a situation that isn't even ideal, but it doesn't matter for him because he is objectively the easiest target for whatever quarterback is playing for the Raiders rest of season. He is, even though we call him the wide receiver 1, he is a tight end. He is going to be lined up more often than not in the slot. They can line him up on the outside, but they will line him up in ways that are going to be easy for Aiden O'Connell to get him the ball. Jacoby Myers, on the other hand, I think is going to be a really viable flex option for you every single week. He's already demonstrated this without Devonte Adams on the field in previous games. He was out this past week. He'll be back healthy sooner rather than later, and he's a number 2 receiving threat in this offense. And no, do you want to bet consistently on number 2 receiving threats and horrible offenses? Not normally, but I will make a bet on Jacoby Myers because he has consistently in some of the worst fantasy-friendly situations over his entire career, dating back to New England, he's been productive. And he has finished as a low-end wide receiver too. You can count on it this year. I am willing to bet on it this year. He is the most unsexy name in fantasy football that people just, for some reason, don't ever want to talk about, and yet he's consistently scoring points and has a really nice, solid floor. So expect both of these guys, honestly, to be decently productive. You're going to go with the upside shot in Brock Bowers, who's going to be hyper-productive. Jacoby Myers is going to be a very safe flex option week in and week out.
All right, let's talk about Bree Hall, actually. So Bree Hall, does he actually have any repercussions from this trade? He is the running back 6 after this week's games. He actually has had a pretty good game this week, and The main thing that you have to look at for Breece Hall that could potentially affect him is the red zone. And we talked about this with Garrett Wilson, but Devonte Adams is going to be the primary red zone target over even Breece Hall. And so Breece Hall's touchdown upside could decrease because of this. And that would be the reason that you could potentially short Breece Hall because of what happened today. Now, here are a couple arguments you can make that actually I don't think it makes a difference, which that's personally where I'm at. I'm kind of neutral on Breece Hall. Number one, in the other night's game, you actually saw the Jets give Breece Hall more of a workload than they have most of the season, with Braylon Allen really only getting a couple carries and Breece Hall pretty much playing all of the snaps in that game and getting all of the carries. And so he actually got a larger share of the work. And if that continues, it could offset any potential red zone capability or possibilities that Breece Hall does have. And so if that is true, then I think that would definitely help Breece Hall in this situation. The other thing is this offense as a whole is going to get better and more dynamic, right? And so you're going to be able to move the ball even more through the air. Teams are going to have to respect both Garrett Wilson and Devonte Adams. This is going to be a problem for defenses, and having to deal with, honestly, Adams, Wilson, and Breece Hall, it's going to be a chore for defenses. And so this could help Breece Hall in that aspect, maybe between the 20s, even if he does face a little bit of regression in terms of his red zone production. Between the 20s, maybe Breece Hall gets a little bit better, because honestly, that's where Breece Hall this year has not been super good yet. And it's where but even then, still being the running back 6, that's why I'm not super worried about Breece Hall. But he might get less share of the passing game. We don't know. It's not like he's getting 8 targets a game right now. He's getting 5 or 6 maybe. So
to me, this makes him very Gibbs-esque, which is not necessarily bad. No. He's got a pretty high floor.
So I don't think it affects him a whole lot. Let's pivot to Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy is the wide receiver 1 in the Cleveland Browns offense now. When you're looking at what Jeudy was doing at the beginning of the year, it actually wasn't anything that was disrespect. I mean, it wasn't anything crazy here. 11.5, 12.5, 9, and 13.5. He's actually producing it. And in the last couple of games, it's 2 points and 4 points. But his targets went down pretty significantly against Washington and against Philadelphia. Now, you'll see Jerry Jeudy, his targets bump back up to the 8, 6, 7, 9 range. And you saw he can be a flexible option there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how I would describe Jerry Jeudy rest of the season. I'm not dropping Jerry Jeudy because of this. And I think Jerry Jeudy, you hold him on your team and you see what he does without without Amari Cooper there, with Deshaun Watson still, and that's kind of the trouble.
Hopefully with Jameis soon. All the talk. There's been so much talk now. They were just peppering Stefanski, the media, is with questions about Deshaun if he's going to start, and he's like, yes, he's the starter. Yes, he's the starter. He's going to cave at some point, I swear, or Deshaun's going to get hurt because he's taking 10 sacks a game because he can't read the field. So.
Now, the other guy that's going to benefit from this is David Njoku. Njoku obviously hasn't been healthy so far this season, but he might be the main beneficiary of the change from a fantasy perspective.
I think he very well could be.
Because with Njoku, you saw him get a ton of targets last year, and granted, a lot of those were with Joe Flacco. But I would bet that, since the common trend with Jerry Jeudy's targets dropping off is that the last 2 games, David Njoku has been back in the lineup. Mm-hmm. So it makes me wonder, would Deshaun Watson just rather throw to David Njoku all the time, who David Njoku hasn't really done anything yet this season. But I think that's going to change. I think David Njoku is somebody you hold on your rosters in terms of fantasy for tight end, because tight end's a crap show right now. And this offense, while it's still a crap show, he just became maybe the number 1 option there. So
and a couple more things to follow here. Kahlil Shakir may have some solid games still the rest of the season, because with Amari Cooper's presence as a vertical threat, it may open the field up a little bit for him in the short to intermediate game. But again, ceiling-wise, you're not expecting anything crazy from Kahlil Shakir. I think he's back to the position and the skill set that you expected from him previously when Stephon Diggs was there, and that is an exclusive slot wide receiver that is just kind of there. And Amari Cooper is going to get, so many of those targets in that offense. I expect Cleveland to transition potentially to a run-heavy offense with Chubb returning. You've got Foreman. Jerome Ford is out with the hamstring, so Foreman is just kind of the next man up. Is Foreman on that team right now? Yes. I always lose track of where Foreman is, but I think it's him. And look, anyone who's back there in the Cleveland backfield, as long as Deshaun Watson is playing quarterback and cannot throw the ball, I suspect now that Amari Cooper is out of that offense as well, that they will probably transition to more of a run-heavy offense. Stefanski has done this in the past when they've had less competent quarterback play. This is the least competent quarterback play they've ever had. So get ready for it. Nick Chubb honestly might be a little sneaky throw-in or sneaky add if you can get him on, get your hands on him before he comes back fully healthy and eases into his workload. And then Aaron Rodgers. Honestly, this guy is become a very streamable option. Potentially, you might want to even look at starting him every single week if he can string together multiple games of really solid production. If he's throwing to Devonte and slinging it all day, he's going to become the Aaron Rodgers of a few years ago from a production perspective. And I'm really excited to see what this does for the offense as a whole.
And last guy here, Trey Tucker from the Raiders. Obviously, Trey Tucker was somebody who was a trending waiver ad when you had both Jacoby Myers and Devonte Adams out for the Raiders. And he becomes the wide receiver 2 now. What I think you most likely see in Las Vegas is I think it's a very concentrated offense in terms of the targets and the fantasy production. So I think it's going to be, I think you're going to run it through Bowers and Jacoby Myers mostly. And I don't think Trey Tucker.
Madison is a flex option,
and
apparently.
Madison, I think that's where it is. So Trey Tucker, probably not a huge benefit there, but obviously a lot of guys affected by this move here, and both of these moves, two moves that really did shake up fantasy football a lot.
Yeah.
And so make sure, like I said, if you enjoy the video, make sure you drop a like and make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you go to flockfantasy.com/domain to get a team blueprint. If you need help with your fantasy football team, we'd love to review it, give you some feedback, and help you try to win your fantasy football leagues. But appreciate you guys watching. Peace out, and we'll see you later.